What would you do if your wife's life depended on it, and your only options were to sell the last piece of land your family has left, or beg for help from the man who destroyed your livelihood? That's the choice Ethan Miller faces. And time is running out. If Ethan Miller had known that this morning would be the day his life split in two, the life he lived before and the life he would never escape after, he might have braced himself. But nothing prepares a man to choose between the love of his life and the land that carries the graves of everyone who came before him. He stood on his creaking wooden porch as dawn spilled across the Montana Valley, turning the fields gold. A beautiful sight on any other day. Not today. Today, the sunrise only illuminated the shaking piece of paper in his hands. A bill, a warning, a countdown. Final notice, it read. The words looked harmless at a distance, but up close, they gnawed at him like wolves. He folded the paper slowly, almost gently, because part of him still believed that if he handled the problem with enough care, it might stop being real. But the land in front of him didn't care. The fields waited, the fences sagged, the valley remained indifferent. He tucked the letter into his pocket. Then he whispered, "Please, not today." Because Ethan already knew something was wrong. He didn't hear Lily moving inside the house. No soft humming in the kitchen, no clinking of cups. The silence pressed a weight against his ribs. He stepped off the porch, heading back to the tractor, but halfway there, he stopped, turned. The curtains in the kitchen window were still, too still. Curiosity pulled him back toward the house. Quiet curiosity. The kind that creeps up on a man when his instincts whisper warnings his mind refuses to admit. Inside, Lily stood at the sink, one hand gripping the counter, her knuckles pale. Her chest rose and fell in fragile, uneven breaths. Her skin looked almost translucent under the morning light. "Lil?" Ethan said softly. She tried to straighten, tried to smile. "I'm okay, just dizzy again." Her voice was thin, like she was rationing each syllable. Ethan's stomach tightened. Concern washed over him in a cold wave as he crossed the room. He took her hand, felt the tremble she tried to hide. "You need to rest," he murmured. "I need to live," she whispered. It was the kind of sentence a woman speaks only when fear has planted roots deep inside her. And Ethan felt that fear lodge itself in him too. He helped her to the couch, tucked a blanket around her shoulders, and brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. She was warm. Too warm. Fever had been stalking her for days. "I'll get you water," he said. "No, stay with me a second." He did. He sat beside her until her breathing steadied. But his heart didn't. When he finally stepped outside again, trying to breathe away the tightness in his chest, he saw a dust cloud rising on the dirt road. Not the kind their neighbors made with old pickups. This was cleaner, faster, expensive. A sleek black truck pulled into his driveway. Henry Dalton stepped out. Ethan's pulse jumped. Henry's polished boots landed in the dirt like they didn't belong there. And they didn't. Henry's family came from money, not soil. He didn't know the feel of calloused hands or the difference between good soil and dying land. But he knew opportunities. He hunted them. And he smelled desperation in others like a bloodhound. He smiled. "Morning." Ethan didn't answer. Henry looked around with a casual arrogance that set Ethan's teeth on edge. "Still holding on to this place?" he asked. Ethan didn't engage. Henry pulled a thick envelope from his jacket and dropped it at Ethan's feet, like he was throwing scraps to a stray dog. "Cash offer. You won't get better. You walk away clean." Ethan stared at him. Not interested. Henry stepped closer, lowering his voice to something darker. "Everything is for sale, Ethan, especially when a man's drowning." Ethan felt something cold crawl up his spine. Henry leaned in. "Think it over. You don't have much time." He climbed back into his truck and drove away. Ethan finally stooped to pick up the envelope, intending to toss it inside unopened, but something inside it caught the light. A small flash. He opened it. The cash offer was huge, far above the land's market value. But what froze Ethan's blood was the paper stapled behind it, Lily's latest hospital bill. Henry was not supposed to have that. Shock hit Ethan with a violent jolt. He looked around the empty yard as if someone might be watching. His fingers tightened around the papers. Someone leaked information about Lily, and Henry had his claws in it. Before he could even process the horror rising inside him, a small blue Subaru pulled into the driveway. Clara Reynolds stepped out, medical bag in hand. Just seeing her brought Ethan a sliver of relief. Clara had the kind of presence that made chaos quiet. She checked on Lily, adjusted medication, spoke to her with a tenderness that made Ethan feel less alone. When she stepped aside with him, her voice softened. "She's getting worse, but there's a program in Seattle, experimental. It could buy her time." "How much?" Ethan whispered. Clara hesitated. "More than your insurance will touch." He sagged against the wall, breath unsteady. "But there are grants, emergency funds, options. You're not out of hope." Ethan closed his eyes, letting that relief wash over him. For the first time that morning, he felt like maybe the whole world wasn't collapsing. That relief lasted 30 minutes until his younger brother's truck screeched into the driveway. Jacob hopped out wearing a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Big bro, heard you needed some help." Ethan narrowed his gaze. "Who told you that?" Jacob shrugged. "Town small." But Ethan didn't like the way Jacob was scanning the house, the land, the locked drawer in the living room he thought no one knew about. Jacob stayed for dinner, told jokes, laughed too loudly, avoided Lily's gaze. And after the plates were cleared, he cornered Ethan outside. "You got any spare cash, just for a few days?" "I don't have anything to spare," Ethan said. Jacob's smile twitched. "Come on, with everything going on." Ethan stiffened. "What do you know, Jacob?" Jacob swallowed hard. "Nothing, just rumors." But Ethan knew every twitch of Jacob's face. Jacob was lying. A storm rolled in that night and crashed over the valley. Rain battered the house, thunder roared across the sky. Ethan lay awake listening to Lily's fragile breaths beside him. Hours passed. Then she gasped, sharp, desperate, terrified. "Ethan!" she grosped. Ethan jumped up. "Lily! Lily!" Her body folded in pain. Her lips turned blue. Ethan didn't remember carrying her to the truck, didn't remember the drive through the storm, didn't remember screaming for help. But he remembered the moment when the ER doors slammed shut in his face and the machines in the room screamed a sound he never wanted to hear again. Hours later, Clara emerged, eyes tired, voice shaking. "She's stable, but barely. We can't wait anymore." Ethan felt the room tilt. Then his phone buzzed. A message lit the screen. "Sell the farm. Save your wife. 7 days. HD." The storm outside finally eased, but inside Ethan, the real storm had just begun. Ethan sat in the waiting room long after Clara walked away. The storm had died outside, but inside him, everything still raged. He stared at the text message from Henry Dalton again and again until the words blurred. "Sell the farm. Save your wife. 7 days." Who sent something like that? Who played with the man's life like that? By morning, he was still there, hunched over, exhausted and hollow. Fear had sharpened into a bitter determination. He couldn't sit still. He couldn't wait for money to fall from the sky. He pulled out his phone and searched everything he could think of. Emergency loans, government grants, rural hardship aid, farm relief funds. Every application said the same thing. Processing time, 4 to 6 weeks. He didn't have 6 weeks. He didn't have 6 days. But somewhere in the endless scrolling, he found something. A fertilizer company that bought old farming equipment for cash. Not enough for Lily's treatment, but maybe enough to start. Curiosity tugged him to his feet. He left the hospital with a plan, fragile as it was. When he got back home, the sky was gray and heavy. The mud from last night's storm clung to his boots as he walked toward the barn. But something was wrong. The side door, always kept shut, was cracked open. He stepped inside cautiously. Jacob was there, digging through his cabinets, his locked drawers, his private folders. "Jacob?" Ethan's voice snapped like a whip. Jacob spun around, eyes wide. "Ethan, I was just... What are you doing in my files?" Jacob stuttered. "I was trying to see if I could help. I needed some documents." "Documents for what?" Jacob froze. He couldn't answer. Ethan took a step closer, fury and disbelief mixing like oil and fire. "Why are you lying to me?" "I'm not." "You are." Jacob didn't deny it. The sight of his brother, his only brother, digging through his financial failures hit Ethan like a hammer. Shock rippled through him. How much did Jacob know? What had he told Henry? Why did Henry have Billy's bill? Jacob avoided his gaze. His hand shook. "Ethan, I didn't mean to." "Get out," Ethan said quietly. Jacob hesitated. "Ethan, get out." Jacob backed away, breathing hard, and hurried out of the barn like a man running from a ghost. Ethan stood alone among the dust and old memories, anger tightening every muscle in his body until his hands trembled. But anger wouldn't pay hospital bills. He forced himself into motion, pulling equipment off shelves, dragging old plows out of corners. The barn became a whirlwind of scraping metal and dust as Ethan piled everything he could sell into the bed of his truck. Hours later, sweat soaked his shirt. His back ached, but the truck was full. He drove from town to town, arguing for higher prices, refusing to be cheated, refusing to give up. At one stop, he spent 15 agonizing minutes trying to start the generator just to prove it still worked. At another, he let go of antique tools he swore he would keep forever. By late afternoon, he had made nearly $12,000. It wasn't much, but it was something. A thin sliver of relief slipped into him, small but real. It felt like the first breath after suffocating underwater. He returned home as the sun sank below the ridge, but before he could even rest, headlights cut across the yard again. Henry Dalton's truck. Ethan's relief snapped into tension instantly. Henry stepped out without waiting to be invited, strolling toward the porch like he owned the place. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. Your brother told me you were desperate." Ethan stiffened. "Your brother told me what?" Henry shrugged. "That you're drowning in debt, that your wife is running out of time, that you'll be selling soon whether you like it or not." Ethan's pulse pounded. "Jacob wouldn't." "Oh, he already did," Henry said, smiling like a vulture. "Men who owe money to dangerous people don't get to choose loyalty." Ethan stepped forward, shaking with fury. "You stay away from my family." Henry leaned in, voice low. "Your family is the reason I'm here." Ethan's jaw clenched, but Henry wasn't finished. "This is my final offer. Sign the papers, walk away with the cash, save your wife. Or lose everything. Get off my land." Ethan growled. Henry smirked. "See you soon, neighbor." When the truck finally rolled away, Ethan was seething.
The night felt colder. The air felt thinner. He grabbed his keys and drove back to the hospital. But as soon as he walked through the entrance, he knew something was wrong. Nurses rushed by him, clipboards shaking, voices raised. Claire burst through a doorway, eyes wide when she saw him. "Ethan, come quickly." He ran behind her. The world narrowed to a tunnel leading to Lily's room. When he reached it, dread tore him open. Machines screamed. Lily lay still. Doctors crowded around her. Clara dragged him back as he tried to rush in. "Let them work." "Lily!" he shouted, voice breaking. He could only watch as they fought to save her. He clung to the doorframe, praying, bargaining, begging in silence. Minutes stretched into a lifetime. Then the alarms quieted. Clara looked at me with exhausted relief. "She's stable again. But Ethan, we're out of time." He sagged into a chair, head in his hands. Clara knelt beside him. "There's something I need to tell you." He looked up, eyes raw. "I've been giving her an unapproved stabilizer. It's experimental. If the hospital finds out, I lose my license." Ethan stared at her, stunned. "I did it because she didn't have time. I did it because you needed a fighting chance." Emotion hit Ethan like a wave. He had no words, only gratitude so heavy it felt like it would break him. He nodded, tears burning. "Thank you," he whispered. Clara squeezed his hand gently. "Just keep fighting for her." Ethan closed his eyes. He would. He didn't know how yet, but he would. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He sat by Lily's bedside, listening to the machines breathe for her, watching her chest rise and fall in small, fragile motions. Each breath felt like a borrowed moment, a moment he didn't know how to pay for. When dawn crept through the blinds, Ethan rose with a stiffness that felt far older than his years. He stepped out into the hallway, mind heavy with desperate thoughts. He couldn't shake Henry's words. Drowning. He kept saying it like he wanted Ethan to believe it. Maybe he did. But Ethan had one thing Henry didn't. A reason worth fighting for. He left the hospital and drove back to the farm as the sky lightened. Birds began their morning calls, but the valley felt muted, subdued, as though the land itself held its breath, waiting for what came next.
When he entered the barn, he wasn't looking for anything in particular, just moving, thinking, searching for a miracle hidden in old wood and dust. But then he noticed something he hadn't paid attention to in years. A stack of his father's old map tubes lined neatly on a high shelf, half buried behind worn crates. He pulled one down, then another, and carried them to his workbench. He unrolled the first map, a survey of the property from decades ago. He unrolled the second, then the third. Old ink, faded paper, his father's handwriting. But something caught his eye. The southern ridge of the property was circled in red ink. Next to it, a note scribbled in his father's careful handwriting. Unstable ground, fire risk, watch the hunters. Ethan leaned closer. His father had known something, something he never had the chance to explain before his death. He grabbed more maps, flipping through them with growing intensity. Another red circle, another note, all around the southern ridge. Fire. The wildfire from years ago, the one Ethan had taken the blame for publicly, the one that nearly took the farm. People had whispered that someone had dropped a cigarette, some said lightning, others blamed hunters, but no one ever found a culprit. Ethan felt a spark ignite inside him. Hunters. Like Henry Dalton, who hunted that ridge every season. He scanned the maps again, heartbeat accelerating. His father had tracked the land carefully, perhaps more carefully than anyone knew. Pieces began to assemble in Ethan's mind. Pieces he didn't want to believe. Henry wanted the land. Henry wanted him out. Henry had access to Lily's bills. Henry pushed him the moment she collapsed. Henry hunted near the ridge the year the fire started. A cold fury built in Ethan's chest. He grabbed the maps, shoved them into his truck, and tore down the road toward town. He didn't even know exactly what he would do next. He just knew he needed the truth. Henry's corporate office sat like an expensive wound against the rural landscape. Glass walls, polished stone, a place built by a man who wanted to tower over others. Ethan stormed inside, ignoring the receptionist's startled protest. He found Henry in his top-floor office, leaning back in a leather chair as though he had not a single worry in the world. Henry looked up, eyebrows raised. Well, you look terrible." Ethan slammed the maps onto his desk. "You caused that fire," he said in a low, shaking voice. "You tried to burn me out." Henry stared at the maps. His expression flickered, but only for a heartbeat. Then he slowly stood. "You've been digging. Dangerous habit." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Admit it." Henry walked around the desk with deliberate calm. "You want the truth. Fine." He leaned close enough that Ethan could smell the expensive cologne mixed with something sour. "No one was supposed to know, but I wasn't the only one hunting there that night. And when the fire started, I did what any smart man would do. I walked away and made sure the right people forgot my name." Ethan felt the room tilt. "You could have killed us." Henry shrugged. "Maybe I should have." The shock hit Ethan so violently he almost staggered back. He saw flashes of the fire now, flames leaping, smoke choking, the look in his father's eyes when they lost half the ridge. Henry smiled. "But fate lets you live, and now after all these years, I'm giving you the chance to walk away. You should take it." Ethan's voice trembled with rage. "You don't scare me." Henry's smile sharpened. "You should be terrified." Ethan walked out before he lost control entirely. He slammed the office door behind him, the map still on Henry's desk like a challenge. He drove home in a fog of fury, barely seeing the road. When he pulled up to the house, he saw someone waiting on the porch. Jacob. But the cocky grin was gone. The swagger was gone. Jacob stood with red eyes, shaking hands, and the weight of guilt heavy on his shoulders. When Ethan got out of the truck, Jacob didn't move. "Ethan, I need to talk," Jacob said, voice raw. "What do you want?" Ethan said, quietly. "I screwed up." "Yeah, you did." Jacob took a shaky breath. "Henry, he paid off my gambling debt. I told him things about you, about Lily, about your bills. I didn't think—" "No, you didn't." Jacob's voice cracked. "I didn't know he was the one who caused that fire. I didn't know what kind of monster he really was. I didn't—" "You didn't want to know." Jacob flinched. Then he held out an envelope, thick, full of cash. "Here, everything he gave me. I want you to use it for Lily." Ethan stared at it. Not with forgiveness, not with anger, just exhaustion. Jacob whispered, "Ethan, I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry." For the first time in days,
A thin breath of relief moved through Ethan's chest. Not healing, not peace, but a small step away from the cliff. Before Ethan could respond, a sheriff's cruiser pulled up the driveway. Sheriff Nolan stepped out. "Ethan, we need to talk about Henry Dalton." The tension returned immediately, wrapping tight around the moment like barbed wire. Nolan handed Ethan a small USB drive. "One of my deputies found something buried in old evidence. You'll want to see this." They leaned against the cruiser as Nolan plugged the drive into the car laptop. A grainy video appeared. A man in hunting gear. A lit bottle. A sudden burst of flame. A panicked retreat into the trees. Even with the low resolution, Ethan recognized every detail. It was Henry. Ethan's breath froze. Nolan nodded grimly. Someone tampered with the official report. This copy wasn't supposed to exist. Tension coiled tighter as Nolan said, "I'm opening an investigation, but Ethan, don't confront him again. He's dangerous." Ethan stared at the screen until his vision blurred. Then he whispered, "I'm not afraid of him anymore." But he was afraid of something else. Lily was still fighting for her life, and he was running out of time. Ethan arrived at the hospital faster than he realized. His hands were still shaking from the video. Henry lighting that fire, running into the darkness like the coward he was. The valley had nearly burned, his family had nearly died, and Henry had walked away untouched. But none of that mattered if Lily didn't make it through the night. He pushed through the hospital doors, barely breathing. The hallways were too quiet, too still, the kind of quiet that makes a man fear the ground is about to fall from beneath him. He turned toward Lily's room, and the stillness shattered. Nurses sprinted past him. Alarms sounded from her hallway. Someone shouted for oxygen. Someone else yelled for the crash cart. Clara grabbed Ethan's arm mid-stride. "Ethan, stay back!" "No," he cried, trying to pull away. But Clara held on, her grip trembling. "Let them work." He stared over her shoulder.
Lily was surrounded, her body limp, her skin ghost pale. Electrodes clinging to her chest as the heart monitor screamed a flat, piercing line. Ethan's knees nearly buckled. He pressed a hand against the window frame, fingers digging into the cold metal. This wasn't a fear he could outrun. This wasn't a fire he could put out. This was the love of his life slipping away. "Come on, breathe," he whispered, voice cracking. "Lily, please." Inside the room, Clara shouted instructions. Her face was tight with urgency as she moved between nurses, adjusting tubes, pressing down on Lily's chest with controlled strength. "Charging to 200, a doctor said. Ethan's heart clenched. "Please, don't take her from me." The defibrillator paddles pressed against Lily's chest. A surge of electricity snapped through her body. Nothing. Then, again. Another jolt. The room held its breath. A faint beep broke the silence. Then another. Weak. Unsteady. But there. Ethan sagged against the wall as every muscle in him gave out. Relief slammed into him so hard he nearly dropped to the floor. He covered his face, sobbing into his calms. She wasn't gone. Not yet. But he had just watched the edge of her life. Clara stepped out moments later, her scrubs damp with sweat, her eyes glassy with exhaustion. "We got her back," she whispered. Ethan nodded, unable to speak. "But it won't hold," she added softly. "We're past the point where stabilizers can help." if she doesn't get transferred to treatment within the next 48 hours. She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Another silence passed between them, this one heavy with dread. Ethan felt it curling cold fingers around his throat. Clara placed a hand on his shoulder. I know you're fighting, but we're running out of road. Ethan stared at Lily through the glass, watching the faint rise and fall of her chest. His heart felt like it was in a vice. 48 hours. 2 days. 2 days to find tens of thousands of dollars or lose her forever. He stepped outside into the bitter evening air. The hospital lights glowed behind him like a city of ghosts. His phone buzzed. A message from Jacob. Call me. It's urgent. Ethan ignored it. He needed space. He needed clarity. He drove to the ridge, his ridge, the one Henry tried to take in flames years ago. The ground was soft under his boots when he stepped out of the truck. Dew coated the wild grass. The wind blew steady and cold. He stood there staring at the land, imagining the flames from that old video spreading across it like a hungry monster. Henry had done this. Henry had tried to erase his family from this valley. The weight of everything crashed over Ethan at once. Lily's collapsing body, Clara's confession, Jacob's betrayal, Henry's manipulation, the debt, the deadlines, the fire, the lies, the pressure, the fear. It all hit him so hard that his legs finally gave out. He dropped to his knees in the dirt. His breath shook in and out of him, uneven. His shoulders trembled. He pressed his hands into the soil, feeling the earth that had raised him, the earth his father had bled for, the earth Henry wanted to bury him under. Why? Ethan whispered into the wind. Why is this happening? He didn't expect an answer. He didn't get one. He cried. Not with shame, not with weakness, but with the raw grief of a man who had carried too much for too long. For a moment, the world felt like it was closing in on him. Then headlights swept the ridge. Jacob's truck rolled toward him slowly. Jacob stepped out, hands in his pockets, shoulders hunched as if he regretted existing. He approached Ethan cautiously. You okay? Jacob asked. Ethan didn't answer. Jacob's exhaled shakily. Look, I know I'm the last person you want to see, but I talked to someone I owe money to. They're giving me 1 week before they come after me. And I know Henry's arrest is going to bring heat my way. I don't know what to do. Ethan looked up. What did you expect me to say? That I'll fix this for you? Jacob's throat tightened. No. I came to say, I'm sorry, and I brought something. He opened the truck door and pulled out a small metal lock box. His hands shook as he held it out. This is everything I have left. All the cash I hid away. I was saving it for when things got bad, but your situation is worse than mine. Ethan stared without taking it. Jacob's voice cracked. You can hate me, but use it. Please. Ethan finally reached out.
The weight of the box surprised him. Jacob stepped back, eyes dropping to the dirt. "I'm trying, Ethan. I'm trying. To be better. For once." Ethan swallowed. There was so much he wanted to say. Words of anger, forgiveness, disbelief, but none of them came out. He simply nodded once. Jacob nodded back, relief flickering briefly in his tired eyes. Then something shifted in the air. A police cruiser climbed the ridge. Sheriff Nolan stepped out, his face lit by the blue and red flashes. He approached them slowly, removing his hat. "Ethan, I have an update." Ethan stood, bracing.
Nolan spoke with measured weight. The evidence you saw, the video, it's real. And we've tracked the tampering to one of Henry's old associates. The DA is moving fast. An arrest is happening tonight. Ethan felt the tension run through him like electricity. Henry would finally face justice. But Lily still wasn't safe. Relief and fear snarled inside him, each pulling in opposite directions. "Ethan," Nolan added, "this could change everything for you, for the valley." Ethan nodded slowly. "I'm not stopping until he pays for everything he's done." Nolan put a steady hand on his shoulder, and he will. But the sheriff's next words drained the warmth from the night. "Go to your wife. Don't waste the time you have left." Time. Always running out. Always slipping away. Ethan looked back at the ridge, at the land that held every memory he had, and the land Henry tried to destroy. He whispered, 48 hours. I won't lose her." And with that, he headed back to the hospital. His fight wasn't over. It was only now beginning. Ethan drove back to the hospital with a single thought pulsing through him like a heartbeat. 48 hours. That number echoed in his head with every passing mile, every gust of cold night air rushing through the half-open window. The town lights blurred at the edges of his vision. He barely noticed he was gripping the wheel so tightly his knuckles had turned white. By the time he stepped into the dimly lit hospital hallway, exhaustion pressed down on him from all sides. But he pushed through, walking with the steady, deliberate steps of a man whose soul had been sharpened by fire. Lily lay motionless in her bed. The machines hummed around her, breathing for her, keeping her tethered to a world that seemed to be slipping through her fingers. Ethan sat down beside her and took her hands softly, gently brushing his thumb along her knuckles. Her skin was cool, her breathing shallow. He leaned closer. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." He wanted her to hear him. He wanted him to feel him. He wanted his voice to pull her back from whatever edge she hovered over. Clara entered quietly, clipboard in hand, eyes heavy with worry and sleeplessness. She paused when she saw him, her expression softening. "How is she?" Ethan asked without looking away. "She's fighting," Clara said, "but she's tired, Ethan. Too tired." Ethan swallowed hard. "The transfer, when can we move her?" "We're trying to get approval pushed through now, but time isn't on our side." It never had been. Before Ethan could respond, the distant sound of raised voices echoed from the lobby. Clara's head lifted, eyes narrowing. Ethan's pulse jumped. Then the hospital doors burst open. 2 deputies struggled with a raging, furious Henry Dalton as they forced him through the hallway, handcuffs glinting under fluorescent lights. His suit was disheveled, his eyes wild with indignation and hate. Henry wasn't going quietly. "You idiots," Henry spat, thrashing against the deputies. "You know who I am. I built half this damn town. I will burn every one of you to the ground." Ethan instinctively stepped in front of Lily's doorway, shielding her. Clara stiffened beside him. Henry's eyes locked onto Ethan, and for a second, the entire world froze. Henry smirked, a twisted, poisonous grin.
You think this fixes anything? You think they're going to save her? You're already too late. Move him, Ethan growled. The deputy shoved Henry forward, but Henry leaned his head back toward Ethan, venom spilling from his tongue. You should have taken my offer. You should have sold. Now you'll lose everything. Ethan didn't speak. He didn't move. He didn't even blink. He just watched as Henry Dalton, finally exposed, finally caged, was dragged down the hallway and out of their lives. And yet Henry's words lingered like a toxin in the air. You're already too late. Clara touched Ethan's arm gently. Don't listen to him. But Ethan wasn't listening to Henry anymore. He wasn't listening to anything except the faint, fragile beeping of Lily's heart monitor. That was the only sound that mattered. Moments later, the hospital administrator approached. A man he'd never seen run before tonight. His glasses sat crooked on his nose, sweat beaded on his forehead. Mr. Miller, he said breathlessly. The transfer. It's been approved. Seattle has accepted your wife under compassionate priority. Ethan blinked. What? What does that mean? It means she'll get the treatment, the administrator said, shoulders sagging with relief. At no cost. Ethan's breath left him in a single broken rush. He staggered back a step, then turned slowly toward Clara. She nodded with trembling eyes. Community donors, Clara whispered. People saw what Henry did. The sheriff spoke up. Word spread. They rallied for you, for her. Relief washed over Ethan so hard he had to grab the edge of the bed to steady himself. He bent down, pressing his forehead to Lily's hand. We got it. We got you the help. Just hold on. Please hold on. That night, the medical team prepared Lily for transport. Clara oversaw every detail, reviewing every chart, adjusting every dosage, repeating orders to ensure nothing was missed. Ethan never left Lily's side. When the ambulance arrived, Ethan helped wheel her out. The cold air stung his skin, but he didn't notice. He was too focused on the gentle rise and fall of Lily's chest. As they loaded her inside, Clara placed a gentle hand on Ethan's shoulder. She has a real chance now. Ethan nodded. You saved her, Clara. Clara shook her head slowly. No, you refused to give up. That made all the difference. Jacob stood at a distance, hands in his pockets, watching silently. Shame still haunted his eyes, but something else lived there too. Hope. The kind that comes when a man finally decides to stop running from himself. When the ambulance doors closed, Ethan leaned against them for a moment, one hand pressed to the cold metal. He whispered, Just live, Lily. Live for both of us. The ambulance drove off into the early morning dark, red lights fading down the long rural road until only silence remained. Days passed, then weeks. The Seattle hospital sent steady updates, moments of progress, setbacks, improvements, more improvements. And then one crisp morning, Ethan received the call that felt like the sun breaking the world open. She's awake, Mr. Miller. She's asking for you. He drove for hours, heart pounding with every mile. When he entered her room, Lily was sitting up, pale but alive, smiling the soft, tired smile he had fallen in love with all those years ago. Hey, she whispered. Ethan broke, but this time he cried with relief, not fear. He sat beside her, kissed her forehead, held her hand with the gentleness of a man touching a miracle. You came back to me, he whispered. I heard you, she said, tears slipping down her cheeks. I heard you the whole time. Months later, when Lily returned home, the valley greeted us with golden fields and quiet skies. The ridge stood tall. The old house waited. The farm had survived everything, just like they had. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Ethan wrapped his arm around Lily on their porch. She leaned into him, warm and alive. We made it, he whispered. The valley stretched before them, no longer a battlefield, but a promise. And we're never losing this place again. They stood together in the fading light, scarred, stronger, unbroken. a family that refused to be erased, a love that refused to die, and a land that would remain theirs no matter who tried to take it.